It's now 8:01.
Time to
So
rock and roll.
over to you to
Thank
kick us
you.
off.
Thank you, Craig. So, as Craig said, for those of you who are new to our Friday mornings, welcome. And our beginning of every Friday starts with just a moment to pause and recognize where we are. I've gone off script today. Typically, we will have some kind of image photo that either Craig or I have taken of SAIT's campus, but I was lucky enough this week to go ride the Bow Valley Parkway on Monday. Now, I promise Craig I won't say too much about the colors, but it was gorgeous out there. And always when you get those moments just to stop and think, we are very, very fortunate to be where we are and the care that has been taken of the land and the stewardship that continues. It is, we're all a part of it every single day. So we would like to recognise that we are located at States Campus and in fact the Bow Valley Parkway on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the people of the Treaty 7, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kaurna, the Tsuut'ina, and the Îyârhe Nakoda of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney. We also recognise that Calgary is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Thanks, Craig.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny.
Welcome.
And folks, yes, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Believe it or not, Jenny, despite the fact that you and I were going back and forth about the title that we selected for this one,
Mm.
um, we have probably one of our larger audiences in a while. So clearly, relational leadership. See, I don't know why we picked that because it is actually hard to say.
I'm not sure it's a
Um,
thing, but we made it a
yeah,
thing.
we'll make it a thing. Um, you know, as we started digging into this one,
Mm-hmm.
we were trying to figure out what the heck does it mean? And there's relational leadership, there's transactional leadership. I think the one thing that came to mind for me is when we started talking about relational leadership is, are you telling me we got to be friends with everybody at work?
And there's a title that's gone a long, long way in so many different ways. And we still see people talking about my work family,
Hmm.
and it works for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have people who will be friends with everybody. That's just their nature. That's their personality. But I think we step into an interesting space when we think about leaders. Like, do you have to like your leader? Does your leader have to like you? So I think the answer to your question is no, we don't always have to be friends, or we don't all have to be friends. There is certainly a measure of respect. I have a feeling I'm going to bring the word kindness in here and have to define it a few times before everybody goes, that's just too soft and fluffy for us. Um, and I think the other piece in here too is how do we ensure that we do the work together? That's a key part of this because we always say this when we come to work, our job is to execute. Like there's a performance that we're looking at. And as a leader, your job is to elevate performance beyond ordinary, beyond what's purely expected, depending on the situation. And it could be that relationships will get you further faster.
Mm, that's interesting, right? So yeah, a title can make you a manager
Hmm.
or a leader with positional authority, I suppose. But perhaps it's, the relationships that you can cultivate with your team, which
Hmm.
really help you accelerate performance. And so, how do you go about doing this then?
It's funny, isn't it? It seems so simple when we start to say it out loud, and yet it's not common. So one of the things I've noticed, I don't have research behind this, I think there's a fair few articles been written on it. We've become again very transactional. And I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. And we've also become addicted to, I'm going to say addicted to overwhelm. It used to be busy. Like we wore the badge of busy, like with pride and with honor. And it was my calendar's full, good luck getting in. And now it seems that we're trying to normalize being overwhelmed, which when you say it out loud like that is silly, like it's just crazy. And the problem with this building relationships in the workplace is because of those, let's refer to them as addictions. Please don't anyone take me out of context. We're connected deeply, if you like. But we we want everything to be efficient and we want everything to be compliant. And no human being is. We're really not. And this takes time. To build a relationship takes time. It's not efficient. And it's probably not very compliant either. It has to be done in small moments. There's a cadence
Mhm.
attached to it. There's a huge measure of care. Like it's really hard to build a relationship if you don't care. So sometimes the work is how do I find a way to care?
Yeah.
And then it's what are those micro moments? And the simple one I believe we've talked about this before. The question, how are you? And I always say in a classroom, please don't ask that question if you don't care for the answer. And that doesn't make you a bad person, but everybody will say, if I say, how are you? I am going to get good, great, or fine. And probably each one of those is a lie. So there's a secondary question. We've got to wait long enough to hear the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the other piece in something that I heard on another podcast, somebody talking about this same thing, asking the question, how are you? And then stopping, waiting for that, road answer and then saying, no, really, Jenny, how are you?
Yeah, exactly. That's
Right.
exactly it.
But how many of us, some folks love leaning into that.
Hmm.
There's a bell curve on everything. There's some folks who would love leaning into that almost to the point of, really, Jimmy, I am actually fine. It's all
Yeah.
good. You can stop, right? To others who, would rather probably not say good morning in the first place, never mind asking in the hallway how you are.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's important because you mentioned something earlier around, we become so transactional.
Hmm.
And I think as for us to dive into this conversation a little more, we'll come back to kind and nice. We'll come back to some of these other pieces. But maybe we should probably just define and contrast perhaps transactional leadership versus relational leadership. Like maybe we should lean into that a little bit just so we're all on the same page.
I think for me, this is not textbook. I think for me, transactional leadership is where our conversation is always about the task, about the job, about maybe the numbers, depends on the kind of leader that you are. And it's very driven to get something. So the literally the transaction. We're giving and we're taking, but it's all based on only that task. It becomes very black and white. And to be fair, you could do most of that via email or via Teams. You could.
Yeah.
And we kind of trick ourselves, especially if we find this difficult, because now if you're back working face to face, you can go to somebody's desk and ask for something. You can go for somebody's desk and check in on something. And you're like, yes, I go out on the floor and I talk to my people, but you don't know your people. And that's where relational leadership comes in for me is do you actually know the human beyond the job title?
Mhm.
And that takes a good amount of work to be able to do that. And some people don't want you to know them. So we've got, to your point earlier, you asked Jenny about a weekend. In my husband's terms, I will verbally puke to you about my weekend and you'll know all that you need to know. You ask somebody else and they say, yeah, it was good, thanks. What did you get up to? Not much.
Yeah.
It can be hard.
Yeah. But to your point, knowing your people is also knowing which ones don't want to share, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Right. And so that's a bit of an art. Your comment around getting to know the human behind the worker, sorry, however, I know you just said it like 4 seconds ago, but
The human beyond the job title.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, Probably, I'm willing to bet that makes some folks feel a little uncomfortable, or maybe feel like they're overstepping boundaries on that, right? Work is work,
Hmm.
home is home.
Yeah. And
Uh,
boundaries is a good conversation. Like you do have to know your boundaries. And interesting piece with home and home, that's why the pandemic changed it a little bit. Like this is our home, right? Behind us already, there's 4 or 5 different questions that might pop up from there.
yeah,
And I think the other part in there too, to your point, is it's okay if somebody doesn't want to let you into that human piece, but I'm
absolutely.
pretty sure you'll still pick up on cues that are enough for you to know enough about that person.
Yeah, I mean, there inevitably will be something, and I
Mm.
think the I'm always cognizant too when we have these conversations of sharing these ideas and going forward on some of these things and really wanting to make sure we put the filter of time in here as well, right? Because
Mhm.
this is not a, well, I joined Jenny and Craig this morning and now I'm going to go find out all about my people and I'll have it done by the end of the day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This takes time, right? You can't force relationships. Um, we can do certain things as teams, as individuals to try and get to know each other a little better, right? Grab a coffee, grab a lunch, those simple type of things. Um, but I guess if somebody is on the line and feeling like they're struggling to get to know their team or getting to know their people,
Hmm.
where would we start? What type of advice? We've got you could do it anywhere from the new leader who's just stepped into a team or a leader who's been around for a while going, you know what? I really don't know Jimmy on my team, and we've been working together for 10 years.
Mm. There's so many different ways. I think the thing that's really stuck with me the last couple of years is the phrase connect before content. It's so simple. And your connect before content can happen at the beginning of every meeting. And it's basically a social capital moment. And I have to be careful using the word social capital because it depends what your background is as to how you define it. But we are talking about basically building relationships. And your social capital moments can be 30 seconds, and they can be 3 minutes, they can be 30 minutes if you have the time. And I know at least one leader who literally got to the point that you were just talking about, and they're like, well, we're doing good. I don't know anybody on this team. And the other thing too is we're not just talking about leader to team, we're talking about team member to team member
Mm,
as well, because they do a lot of the work together. And when you build a relationship, you build trust, you build helpfulness, you build reciprocity. Like there's a whole lot of different things that come from this. And so that leader actually said, okay, next week's team meeting, you get 5 to 10 minutes. I don't remember the parameters. And I believe that they were a bit of a PowerPoint company. You get 5 PowerPoints and tell us what you want us to know about you. And I've seen it done where I would introduce myself. I've seen it done where people have set them up. So my job might be to introduce you. So now we have to get together. I have to find out 5 things about you, and you can do that way. That takes time, and you're taking time out of people's days. So are you okay with that? The other thing that I do in a classroom a lot, and it's fascinating. I had 26 probably last month. I gave them 5 post-it notes each, and I said, please go find out 5 things that we don't know already. Now, I've been with this group for a little while. We pretty much know each other. The safety's been built. It's a good cohort. And it was incredible what we found out in less than 20 minutes. There's an opera singer in the room. There's somebody who is a hunter, has butcher qualifications, canning qualifications. There was a ice dancer. I had one more. Somebody else had played sports at some national level, and nobody in the room to that point knew any of it. We're always willing to give something. We just need to be asked or need to be set up for that. So I'd lean into the connection moments, and maybe that's the way to think about them is moments.
mm,
And if it's not about getting to know the person and their life, remember everybody shows up with that sign around their neck that says, see me, hear me, value me. And even doing that will start to build a deeper relationship.
yeah. Why do you think you probably answered it earlier, but why do you think um, leaders struggle with this? Is it truly just about the we got to get stuff done? I don't have time for this. This is too light and fluffy, Jenny. I need to generate a result, and you want me to take moments.
Yeah, don't say it like that, Craig.
I'm playing a part here, Jenny.
Yeah, and very well. Yes, I think it's awkward for some. I don't think we give the value. I caught it. Tom's just
Mm,
popped in the chat that you have to build the trust. This work builds trust. And I'm not sure that we always see the value because we're so driven to see a value as an outcome. I promise I won't go down this road, but how we do the work with each other is going to lead to that outcome. So you are actually creating value by doing this. So the famous study was Alex Pentland in Europe, and I can't remember the countries, one of the Scandinavian countries, and they banned coffee cups at desks. Yeah, you just laugh
Mhm.
when I say, "Can you imagine do that in North America?" Like, yeah. But they didn't ban coffee. And what they said was, go have coffee, but we invite you to have coffee here. And the only rule over here is that while you have your coffee here, is that when you're chatting with other people, if you choose to, you didn't have to, if you choose to, you're not allowed to talk about work.
Mm.
And I don't remember the time that the study went on, but the metrics afterwards, in terms of, in fact, improvement on the bottom line, satisfaction and engagement in the workplace was crazy. And I actually went on a clickbait thing because I didn't believe the numbers that I first heard. I've got, okay, I've got to find the paper. This can't be true. And it was true. And it was simply because they banned coffee cups at desks and had people get together.
Wow.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Apparently, Florin is saying that it was done in Sweden.
that wouldn't surprise me. It's
No,
one of those
absolutely.
countries. Yeah.
A couple questions have come in,
Hmm.
and so let me see how to start this one. Okay, these probably flow best this way. So, if you're new to managing people, Jenny, how do you learn these soft skills? Right?
I like that you're willing to learn them. That's excellent because you
Yeah,
can. I think
you
it's,
can. You said right.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's always an interesting angle to this. If you sit with a preference towards perhaps introversion, my suggestion is don't go try and do this in a group of 26 people. Right? Work one-on-one for a while. You will be equally as effective. Um, I think it's practice. I think there's a certain amount of self-awareness, right? We all have essential skills and human skills. And we all have a picture of what we think they need to be, and that picture is probably out of balance of what they really need to be. And so, the simplest start is, do you recognize your people? See me, hear me, value me. So use their names, stop and listen, value the work that they do. And that's going to be different for each person. And when I say value the work they do, I'm not talking about ribbons for showing up, gold stars for doing the day job. But when there's something worth valuing, make sure that you catch that moment.
Yeah, and that honestly, that takes work, that takes effort. That might take tracking on your part as a manager, depending on the size of your team. It's okay. I think sometimes folks feel, well, what you want me to keep a spreadsheet or a note in my calendar around the last time I recognized Jenny for something? Yeah, maybe,
Mhm.
right? Because you do want to make sure if you are, uh, you don't want to always be singling out Jenny. It's easy for me to do that, right? But you don't always want to be doing that because then that also creates issues. Um, okay, moving along, some other questions here. Um, as a manager, where is that boundary between work and personal that still allows you to get to know your people? I think this is probably the crux of where some folks struggle with this whole
Mm.
concept, right?
And I think the problem with that is that boundary is going to change for everybody in terms of in conversation. And that boundary changes as your relationship builds. Right? If I trust you, I will be far more willing to perhaps open up when things aren't as fantastic. That's a boundary shift in itself. I think that where we have to be careful is as the leader, let your people determine where that boundary sits. So
Mhm.
your questions, that how are you? You're going to know how far you're going to go on that. And in that how are you, I might say to you, well, okay, we have a daughter who's broken her foot at the moment. And so I might say I'm a little distracted because she's not doing so well. She's doing fine, everybody. But that's what I might say. And so then, a couple of days later, you might say to me, Jenny, how's your daughter doing? And so it's a build on there. And I think it requires it requires us to pay attention. That might be the key skill in that you can tell by somebody's body language, by their tone of voice, where those boundaries sit, but we do have to pay attention in there, which is why you can't say, "How are you?" and be halfway down the corridor as somebody's answering you because you won't pick up anything up from there.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Right. No, and that's, I was going to say, and you've talked about this before too, right? If you are going to be a leader, you kind of have to like people. You kind of have to be willing to invest in people and pay attention.
100%.
If you're a leader and you don't like people, this is going to be incredibly hard for you. You are probably going to be a transactional leader,
Yeah.
right?
It's hard.
And your ability to read body language is huge. I think the other thing that I was just thinking of as well is, there's one-on-one boundaries and then there's group boundaries,
Yes. Yep.
right? And so in the group, you're probably always going to play to the safest boundary, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Whereas one-on-one, you might have different conversations, different jokes, different topics that perhaps in the group just don't work out. And, that might be something over time as your team grows and comes closer, a little bit more safety and trust, those things change, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's an interesting balance to have to try and figure out.
And I think, that's somebody had put in the chat there, these are not soft, these are really hard skills.
Hmm.
And I think that's why, sometimes we just, well, this is too hard and we ignore it because it's not comfortable. We're creatures of comfort. And it is a hard balance. And like everything in leadership, sometimes we might not get it right. And the key there, though, is recognizing that and owning that.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay. Hey, screwed up. Sorry, right?
Yeah.
A couple questions here on the other side. So there's
Yeah.
two questions here basically on the same thing, same theme about what about the opposite when people regularly overshare personal details with you when you haven't invited that level of comfort. I feel like a therapist at times.
I learned this in the pandemic, and I think it's really helpful for leaders, especially when you get the same, either a repeat, I'm going to call it a repeat story coming back, or experience coming back, or that same person going beyond their boundaries. The three questions that you want to lean in with is, what are you able to do for yourself, or what are you doing for yourself? What do you need from me? You don't have to be able to provide that, right? But you can ask the question, and then what can the organization do to help? That's one thing. And then the other thing that I really like is how, we talk about, we get really stuck. Should the door be closed or should the door be open? Which way will it? So if you run very much on an open door policy, we've talked a bit in here about time blocking. And one of the time blocking ideas that I like comes from John Amici, and he calls it PIT time, PIT, and that's purposefully interruptible time. And if you have that time available, you're inviting people in to check in on work, to come and say hi, to fill you in. So you also narrow the times when that's available. So it's not a welcome, come on in and talk forever, overshare in here.
Mhm.
And then the other thing too is sometimes we just simply have to assert the boundary. And it might sound like, Jenny, this is way beyond the um, the level of my skill set in order to be able to help you, or um, I'm finding this conversation uncomfortable at this point because I have to act as your leader, or it's hard to put the words around it without a context.
Yeah.
That's hard for people to do, but that could be essential for people to do.
Okay. Similarly, a couple questions along the same lines of um, problem being an oversharer as a leader, right? How do I stop myself from oversharing with my team?
I think we're back to that pause. Are you giving yourself enough transition time, reflection time? And sometimes that's a moment before you go into the meeting. Okay, where's my boundaries on this? What do my team need to know? And if you're sitting there saying, yep, I'm an oversharer, what leads to that part? And so there's a boundaries conversation in here, and it's self-reflection that will allow you to decide, Am I going beyond those? Am I holding back? Right? Sometimes a leader is intent on you don't need to know me, I've just got to drive you. That's not going to work either. So where's that space in the middle? And what do you want to give from there? And what I'll say and attached with that in a sort of connection with that is if you do connect before content, 101 different ways that you can do that. You as the leader, please join in. You don't always have to go first, but join in because people want to know you just as much as you're encouraging them to know each other.
Yeah. Um, sorry, you touched on something there too that just triggered something else. I'll go past in the chat around. I think you also need to be considered conscious of cultural differences, right?
Yeah.
We can have a very North American view of this or a very European view, but I don't know if that triggers any thought for you there.
That's a huge part of it. And our big idea today that comes from so many different angles is know your people. So cultural differences are vast. And the only way that you're going to know is by talking and asking and having the conversation. And then the other thing that we have to bear in mind is neurodivergence as well. And
Mm,
again, we talked about this when we had Curtis on here. These are conversations, not probably not group conversations at all. They're one-on-one conversations. And, be interested. Most people in the workplace know what's right for them. Well, let's work to that. And leadership used to be about, okay, this is my way, we're going to do it my way. And given that in that day, most leaders were extroverted and hugely speak happy, like lots and lots of this going on. And everybody just got carried and had to put up with it. And leadership today is who are we, each individual, and how can I work and get the best from you? In order to
mm.
do that, you've got to know people. And so, if doing a round table connect before content actually scares the life out of three people and ruins their day, then that's not a great thing to do.
That's true. No, that's very true. It's almost as bad as the round table at the end of the meeting to hear everybody's updates.
We said no soapboxes today, Craig.
Oh, sorry. Let's see. Okay, another question here on boundaries.
Yeah.
How do you maintain professional relationships with people if you manage that you also have personal friendships with? I, I could see this, if you've been part of the team, promoted to lead the team, there's all sorts of you part of the, you hire somebody that outside of the office, those type of things.
Yes. And, in a lot of field locations, your leader is your hockey coach. You bump into them in the local shopping. Like it's
Yeah.
hard. I think the key is if you're promoted to leader, and they're all your friends, you used to work on the team and you're promoted to leader, the first, as early as possible, like sit down and have the conversation, right? This is going to be hard on all of us. Let's set some clear boundaries. We had this a couple of weeks, perhaps, strike why the iron is cold, right? I
Yeah.
haven't got a discipline issue. I haven't got a performance issue. We're not in crisis. We simply have a change of roles here. And my role dictates this and your role dictates that. How are we going to make this work? What is your expectations from me? And here is my expectations of you. These are two-way conversations. We use the term a lot, non-negotiables. Have we
Mhm.
talked about those out loud? And then consistency is really important. And again, I would suggest too, as a leader, that self-reflection, am I being firm, fair, and consistent? Um, though you've said them and lived by them, and you'll only know if you're living by them if you reflect on them.
Yeah. I've been through this situation twice in my career.
Mhm.
Once we were partnered in territories together and took over the manager role and had to sit down with my old partner and we sat down. We did it over a couple beers because that worked for us. Had the conversation. Yeah. And inevitably, I think inevitably there will be a point probably in most of those situations where one of you ends up with hard feelings at one point because of something, right? And it's just going to happen, right? in every team, as in every family, there are going to be moments where, you know, you may not feel seen, heard, or valued,
Mhm.
and you may not be making others feel that way either. But that's to your earlier point. How do you recover from that? How do you acknowledge it and move on? I think is the key part. So,
And the key part is acknowledging it out loud. There is a conversation that needs to be had.
yeah. Another question here, a couple questions themes around empathy. What can you do when you struggle? Sorry, what can you do when you struggle with building empathy, feeling empathy? Like, how do you develop empathy?
If you look this up, how do you develop empathy? The answers are interesting. They basically suggest watching more movies and reading more fictional books. Literally, that's the first thing that's suggested. And I think more and more recently, I think we've got the wrong word. This is going to go right against the grain of everything, even I've talked about for years. I think the word we want is compassion because empathy says, I feel what you feel. Well,
True.
very, very, very often, no, I don't. I don't have the capacity to know how you're feeling, but I do know what it's like to feel. And so compassion says, I recognize that there's a challenge here for you, and I am here for you. I'm holding space.
Mm.
I'm here for you in this challenge. I quite like that. And I think we're capable of that. And, I came across a leader at some point in the EQI that we use at SATE, EQI being emotional intelligence, that we use at SATE, there's actually an empathy score. And his empathy score was quite low in comparison. And he said to me, I just don't care. And he said, and I feel awful about that. And as we talked more, what he really did care, he cared about the work, he cared about the people to an extent. But the compassion piece was really easy for him because if one of his team was having a challenge at work, he absolutely could hold the space for that, coach only where necessary. Most times we can find the answers ourselves
Hmm.
and provide the support that was required. Well, that in itself builds trust within our relationship, builds that leadership strength as well. So I think if you're worried about empathy, I think I'd start with compassion. And compassion comes from a root of care. And start just care a little bit. What would it look like if you cared 10% more?
Yeah, that's good. Um, Sorry, just going through there's a few questions here, just trying to see if there's some themes. Um, Shifting into a leadership role as a young person who hasn't been in the company very long, going in to manage people who have been there much longer than I have. This is creating tension, and I feel that I am lacking respect. Um, I'm not sure if it's lacking respect for the people you've taken over, or I think it might be lacking. They're not
Mm.
respecting you. How do you navigate this?
Again, time is going to take time. Again, what we want most when we work with and for people is to know that we matter and to know that we're significant. And so it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. Are you being seen, heard, and valued? Like I am going to keep coming back to those three pieces in all our conversations, in all our interactions. And the other thing I'd offer here is it doesn't matter which generation you're in, you have something to offer. Now we can approach, we'll all have those different expectations and boundaries are slightly different. And the way that we've experienced the world of work is different. There's something to learn there, right? So be interested, have good conversation around that. What do they need from you? And what do you need from them? Remember, it's always two-way.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I find sometimes helps is, our generations are as different as our star signs are as different as our personalities are as different. So you could be in the same boat if you were a Sagittarius leader and you had a team of Librans or Taurians. It's the same as generations. We'd find a way to make it work. So I would just take your time, get to know the people, build the capital, you'll build the trust. And remember, I think we say this every session, trust comes from different domains. So you can build trust in competence,
Mm.
sincerity, reliability, and care. And
Yeah,
that's a lot of work right there.
very good. I'm a little bit taken aback by the astrology references. I think this is a first for us on this. So I'm just trying to work through that one. Although I did hear a while ago, apparently there was a missing astrology sign due to some. Uh, I'll find the article. This is
Okay.
That's a different podcast. Um, so again, I think there's these few questions still kind of around this same theme, Jenny, of how do you build or how do you find the balance between building interpersonal relationships and maintaining personal privacy, right? So I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on there that we haven't yet.
I
See,
think,
it seems like that's kind of the crux of this one is,
hmm,
well, and there was a comment that was I saw it go past earlier in the chat around there, there's a difference between friend and friendly,
yes.
right? And so I don't know, maybe that's kind of the piece.
I think context is one thing, and if we had a day like this is leadership. We talk about this a lot, and that social capital piece. I think to put it in short, I think we have to know individually our non-negotiables and our boundaries. And so if I want to keep my family private, I choose to keep my family private, and somebody is pushing on that, I have to say out loud, I'm somebody that likes to keep my personal life to myself.
Yeah,
And we didn't talk about this before too. There's that whole social media part as well. If you want to set that boundary, don't follow your colleagues on social media and don't accept their follow requests. And if you do, you know full well they have a window in on your life. Are you okay with that? And if you're not okay, then don't do it. There's nowhere in your job description that says you need to do this. So I think it comes back
yeah,
to boundaries all the time. And then for leaders, I think we have to recognize the value of these relationships in the workplace. Like the research is in abundance that when you build them, you build those cultures that we're all looking for, the trust, the reciprocity, the helpfulness, the learning, and that's what's going to help you elevate your performance.
very good. Just a clarifying question that came back about the varying aspects of trust. Trust is, I think you mentioned this different areas of
Yeah,
competence. Sorry,
competence, reliability, sincerity, and care. And that's Charles Feltman's work. I'll put his book in our resources when we release the slides. There's always a slide with some resources on there. I'll make sure Charles's book is in there.
perfect. Another question here around the appropriate use of the expression, this is a safe place to encourage people to be candid. I've had bad experience in
Mm.
a group that would use that expression and then exploit the trust people gave to the group around things that were shared supposedly in a safe space.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the sentence. If a space is safe, we will know it's safe. Like, and I think there's been, I think it attaches to psychological safety, which is our conversation in 2 weeks' time. Um, and I think we've made a lot of mistakes in how we've talked about psychological safety. And what we've seen is a lot of companies that have, and not because we said so in general, this nice bubble across the top. And the nice bubble is everybody pretending and
Mm.
sort of surface acting. And then you get that exploitation in there as well. And that just crumbles any trust and any psychological safety. So if rule of thumb, if you don't feel safe in the space, that's what it's about. It's a risk assessment. Then don't share in there. And then the other thing too, I think, is if that has happened, how are we dealing with that? Because you also get what you tolerate. Although I'm very
Mm.
sensitive in here, those some of those conversations are very difficult. So again, it's going to depend on context and leader and relationships. in that trust world, we don't often talk about Brené Brown's version of trust, which is a long acronym, braving, and the V is vault, as in a vault of confidence. And somebody breaks that confidence that you've entrusted in them. So probably a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah. No. Couple questions, things that I've seen go past in the chat around, my problem is that I care too much, or I'm too compassionate, or I'm too empathetic. I don't know if that.
It's wonderful self-reflection, like to have that awareness. Um, and then, well, where's the line? If you can tell me that you're two, all of these three things, where's the line? At what point does it become too much? And often what happens here is people see empathy, compassion, psychological safety, and accountability as in England we would call it a Cecil. Teeter totter, I think, is the North American term for it. And so if I give all of these things, I have to drop the accountability. Well, reframe, absolutely not. That's not been said anywhere. What we want is the two side by side. Because when we
Mhm.
have the two side by side, we get great clarity. We get leaders who can say, well, this is where we're on the path, and here's how we can go further faster. And you got to put those two side by side. And within there, we'll talk about this in 2 weeks' time. What happens when it goes wrong? Because
Mhm.
destigmatizing failure is a massive part of that conversation, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Speaking of in a couple of weeks, we're
No.
we're a couple minutes closer to a couple weeks from now. That was an awkward segue, but we've kind of hit that point, Jenny, where it's time to wrap up and share our big idea and many, many questions.
There you go. I didn't even write 3 questions. So if you are new to us on a Friday, classically we aim to end with one big idea, two applied strategies that you can take away and put into practice, try out, and then 3 questions was the aim. And those of you who know me well, I am rubbish at numbers. So now we're just going for some questions because Craig always counts the question marks. So our one big idea, this has come out very clearly as we've been talking. Know your people, know your people, know your people. I'll give credit to that quote to me and Craig. Um, and it's so important. I was doing a Lumina session with the group, and in Lumina we talk about underlying as well as how you choose to show up. And there's one gentleman in the room, his underlying, he had a huge, creative, spontaneous, inspirational lean towards his strengths. And I said, and all of them didn't show up in his everyday. And he goes, he had a glint in his eye. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, I like to push the boundaries sometimes. And I said, would that be useful here at work? He said, nobody's asked me yet. And so you gotta know your people one way or another because there is some brilliance hiding that I'm sure doesn't come out because nobody ever asked. So know your people to the extent, and we've talked about that today.
Yeah.
2 things that we can take away. We didn't mention the word fika. Fika is the Swedish term for basically, I think coffee and cake actually. But it's those connection moments where you're building relationships. So 2 things on here to bear in mind. Margaret Heffernan is a bit of a expert, if you like, in the world of building social capital. Her book is called Beyond Measure. The details will all be in the slides that we send out afterwards. But we need to remember it is the mortar between the bricks that holds a company together, and that mortar is your bonds between your people. So the more that we can do to build that, the more cohesive and brilliant we will all be. As she says, company don't have ideas, people do. So take a sort of leaf out of Mark Goulston's book, Be More Interested Than You Are Interesting. Second thing that we can do is actually it's a little bit of a self-reflection. When we look at how committed people are, commitment sits with emotion. It doesn't sit with blandness. And so an exercise that people often struggle to do, I'll ask leaders this sometimes, can you write down 10 things that you're brilliant at? And it might be my pronunciation of the word brilliant with an English accent, I don't know, but people get stuck, really stuck on this one. So, what are you brilliant at? What does your department or your workplace need? Right? There's an intersection between those two. And that could be a good conversation to be involved in. Or as a leader, simply if you want to get to know your people better, leaf out of Marcus Buckingham's book. What is it that you love about the work that you do? The word is intentional. And you're not talking about personal lives here. Ask people what fuels their fire at work. What do they love to do? And then just make sure that they're getting enough of that. Fear not, it's only about 20% of your day needs to be work that you love doing. If you dig into his work, they're known as red threads, and everybody has a red thread of some kind. And if you truly, truly don't, that's a different conversation for sure. But most people have something that they love in the job that they have chosen to do. And then all the questions, let's bring them all up. There they are. For you to take away and noodle on your weekend, on your Friday, maybe next week. And you can take one, you can take all six of them. But I just think in one way or another, that will help us to extend the relationships or deepen the relationships that we have. And then, as you said, Craig, 2 weeks' time, we'll be back.
Absolutely. I will point out there were also 3 question marks in the slide before the questions. But Jenny, as always, thank you. This, speaking of red threads, these Friday mornings with you are one of my red threads. So this is fantastic. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again, Jenny.
Thank you. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks,
All right.
Craig.
Bye.